Hello there. It's not been the best few days when it comes to fighting COVID, even as lockdown 3 has actually begun. The number of cases have been fairly high the last 2 or 3 days. Cases had started to grow at about 2,500 per day, and it was maintained at that rate for something like 2 to 3 days. And then yesterday on May the 4th, we saw the biggest jump that India has seen so far, more than 3,600 fresh cases of coronavirus in India, many of them coming from Maharashtra, and it could partly be because there was a backlog in that particular state, something like 700 cases that were reported. But even if you remove the backlog, it was a big day. And that really means that for now 3 to 4 days, you've been growing at 2,000 to 3,000 cases per day. It also means that the growth rate of coronavirus in India, which you will recall, had fallen. The growth rate of active cases had fallen to below 5%. The doubling rate, therefore, was something like 13 days or 14 days. Now, the growth rate of active cases has risen in the last few days. It's now something like 6.4% is the growth rate of active cases, which means that cases are doubling every 11 days or thereabouts. That's active cases. Now, if you project this forward, it means you're really looking at the present growth rate of a figure like maybe 100,000 cases by the end of May. And that's something to be somewhat concerned about. Now, is there any good news in all of this? Yes, there is some good news. And that good news is that the death rate is still low. The rate when it comes to recoveries to number of people dying, that's still low. And the overall number of deaths in India at 1,500 or 1,600 is still low compared to the rest of the world. When you look at that figure in terms of the number of people who are dying per million, again, if you look at the data, 1.2 people have died in India for every million Indians. And that's a low figure by global standards, but most per capita numbers are low. But there are some states in particular you should watch for. Look at this data which Shamika Ravi has put out. Maharashtra and Gujarat are relatively higher. It's almost 4 or 5 times the national average is the number of people per million who've died in Gujarat and Maharashtra. And we've known that for a while. But in the last few days, there's also been a spurt in the number of people who've been dying in West Bengal. And that is something to keep a bit of an eye on. There have not been that many cases of coronavirus in West Bengal, and has led to some arguments with the center also. The number of people dying per million seems to have risen, seems to have jumped, and it's now above the national average. And that's something that we should be keeping a close eye on. So that's a sort of a status check on where we are with coronavirus on the 5th of May. Not been the best 2 or 3 days. Let's keep an eye and see what the numbers are like today. The economy, however, is something else that has been spoken about today. Abhijit Banerjee, the latest prominent economist, Nobel Prize winner, who came out and spoke about the need for a stimulus, the need for a package, and the need for a package to come really, really quickly. We'll continue to talk about that as we have, but here are all the big stories for today.
India recorded the biggest single-day jump in the number of coronavirus patients and deaths linked to the illness. At least 3,900 new cases were reported and 195 COVID-19 patients died in the last 24 hours, according to the Health Ministry data on Tuesday morning. This takes the total number of cases to 46,433 so far, including 1,568 deaths. About 12,727 patients have recovered so far, and the recovery rate stood at 27.4%.
Union Health Minister Vardhan said on Tuesday that India has so far been able to stave off community transmission of COVID-19. He expressed hope that behavioral change brought about by the infection could become the new normal for a healthy society after the pandemic abates. Union Civil Aviation Minister Hardeep Puri has said that Indians stranded abroad due to the coronavirus outbreak will be charged for the flights bringing them home. He said that the exchequer does not have the space to pay for repatriation. The minister said Air India will be conducting all the flights in the first week and private airlines will be considered going forward. The move follows the criticism against the government that it earlier flew Indians stranded abroad home free of cost, while the migrant labourers were asked to pay for their special train tickets.
This is a special evacuation mission, and all those who will avail of this or can avail of this will have to be charged.
About 15,000 Indians could fly back home from all across the world in the first week of repatriation flights that start from Thursday, the Times of India has reported. Most of those coming back will be from the Gulf countries. In the first week of the biggest ever homecoming exercise undertaken by any country for its citizens, India plans to operate 64 flights from places like UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, US and UK. Naval ships have been separately sent to UAE and Maldives to bring back Indians.
At least 24 coronavirus positive cases have been reported at Army Hospital R&R in Delhi Cant on Tuesday. Among the 24 who have been found positive are 2 medical officers, 3 nursing officers on duty, 2 nursing assistants, and the rest of them are patients of a particular ward. The positive cases also include retired and serving army personnel, a report said. The patients have been shifted to an isolation ward established at Base Hospital in Delhi Cant, and the medical staff has been quarantined. The total number of contact traced people are around 85 who have also been quarantined.
A senior law ministry officer tested positive for the novel coronavirus, following which a part of Shastri Bhavan, which houses several ministry offices, has been sealed. IANS reported that the officer last visited his office on the 4th floor of Shastri Bhavan on the 23rd of April, whereas he tested positive on the 1st of May. As per protocol, tracing of his contacts has been initiated. This is the second such case of sealing of a government office in the Lutyens zone. The Niti Aayog building was sealed last month after a senior official tested positive.
Anyone out in public in Noida and Greater Noida can now be punished for stepping out of their house without the Arogya Setu app on their mobile phones, according to the new guidelines issued by the Uttar Pradesh Police. Not having the government app on the phone will be considered a violation of the lockdown. After making the app mandatory for all central government employees, the centre has also made it mandatory for all employees of private and public businesses to have the Covid-19 app installed on their phones in the guideline issued for the third phase of the lockdown.
Nobel laureate Abhijit Banerjee on Monday called for a big economic stimulus from the Indian government to help the economy tide over the Covid-19 crisis. In a chat with Congress leader Rahul Gandhi, the economist said that the government must revive demand and ensure more money in the hands of people. Banerjee also called on the government to distribute the existing food stock to whoever needs it. He further suggested that the government must give out temporary ration cards to everyone for 3 to 6 months.
People logged on to e-commerce websites on Monday to order electronics, apparel and more as the government relaxed restrictions allowing e-tailers to sell non-essential goods in orange and green zones. Smart devices, work-from-home enablers and fashion clothing proved to be the first things that Indians added to their cart on day one. However, industry executives have warned that lack of adequate manpower amid the lockdown could delay deliveries.